Welcome. We're happy to welcome all of you here today. This hearing will focus on the very high levels of improper payments made by federal agencies, as well as our efforts to curb those wasteful and sometimes fraudulent payments. As everyone, or almost everyone in the room knows, we faced record budget deficits in recent years. Our national debt stands at about $16.8 trillion, well over double what it was just 10 years ago. The last time the debt was this high was at the end of World War II. That level of debt was not sustainable then. It's not sustainable today. While we're beginning to see reports showing an improving financial situation, our country clearly has plenty of work to do on this front. These budgeting challenges require a comprehensive, bipartisan approach. They require us to make tough decisions with respect to both spending and revenues, and also with respect to entitlements. They should also force us to take a tough and honest look at how we can better manage the resources taxpayers entrust to the federal government and demand that we find ways to get better results for less money or better results for the same amount of money. One of this committee's main responsibilities and one of my top goals as committee chair is to demand through better management of government programs that agencies deliver better services to the American people. We do so more efficiently, and we do so wherever possible at a lower cost. I will continue to work with Dr. Coburn and our colleagues in the administration to ensure that federal programs across government are improving key management functions, monitoring results, and finding ways to do more with less in almost everything we do. A key part of these efforts will involve program managers sharpening their pencils and stopping the kind of inexpensive, avoidable mistakes that lead to improper payments. Before going any further, let me just take a minute and say, I think it's important first to explain what it means for a federal agency to make improper payments. As we'll recall, an improper payment occurs when an agency pays a vendor for something. It could be a medical procedure or a piece of equipment, for example, that it did not receive, or maybe even pays them twice. It can occur when a recipient has died or is for some other reason no longer eligible for a federal program. Improper payments also occur when a vendor is no longer permitted for some reason to do business with the federal government. And of course, sometimes people or companies receive payments that are actually fraudulent. According to the General Accountability Office, the federal government made an estimated $108 billion in improper payments in fiscal year 2012. We have a chart just down here. $108 billion in improper payments in 2012. That's a lot of money, but the good news is it was down. It was down from $116 billion the year before and from a record high of $123 billion in fiscal year 2010. I'm encouraged that we are seeing these, I'm tempted to call them small, but when you knock, what is it, $5 billion one year, $8 billion another, that's not small. That's real money. So I'm encouraged that we're seeing these significant drops in the level of improper payments. Obviously, we still have more to do. Despite some progress that's been made, error rates and the amount of money lost to avoidable errors still remains at unacceptably high levels. And what disturbs me most about this problem is that we seem to make these kinds of mistakes at a rate much higher than a business or the average family would tolerate or could afford. And we keep making some of them over and over again. Very often, we know what we do need to do to fix the problem. The testimony we'll hear today shows that we're making important progress, but more needs to be done. Unfortunately, there are several very real and effective tools available to curb wasteful and fraudulent payments that are now being put to use. In 2010, Congress passed, President Obama signed into law the Improper Payments Elimination and Recovery Act, which I co-authored with Dr. Coburn and others. The law aims to make agencies and agency leadership far more accountable for the expensive mistakes they make and represents a bipartisan and bicameral success in preventing waste and fraud. And then last year, Congress enacted an additional law on how to further curb improper payments called the Improper Payments Elimination and Recovery Improvement Act. Among other steps, it established in the law the Do Not Pay program. And this effort was initiated by President Obama through executive action, involves screening federal fund recipients against a list of those ineligible to receive those funds before, I say again, before we cut a check. For example, before an agency could award a contract to a company, the agency would have to cross-check against the Do Not Pay database, which will include a central, comprehensive database of companies and entities that are no longer allowed to do work for the federal government because of a fraud conviction or for some other reason. Our witness from the Department of Treasury will describe how the Do Not Pay program has or has not been successful in preventing improper payments before they happen. The same Do Not Pay program will also stop payment to ineligible beneficiaries. Of course, those watching this hearing may ask the obvious question of why an agency would ever pay, say, an unemployment benefit to an individual who has died or someone who is trying to commit fraud. And unfortunately, the answer is that all too often agencies simply don't do a very good job of coordinating their efforts to prevent improper payments or communicating about best practices. Many also have antiquated databases and computer systems for tracking basic payment information. And all too often, we simply don't allow agencies to access the information they need to avoid cutting checks to the wrong people. There is a specific type of improper payment made by federal agencies that we will highlight today during our hearing. In press stories, we hear about agencies making payments to people who are actually deceased. For example, the Office of Personnel Management Inspector General reported just 2 years ago that some $601 million in improper payments were made to federal retirees found to have died over the previous 5 years. However, such payments to dead people were not unique to this one program. A couple of years ago in my own home state of Delaware, where newspapers reported that 28 years after a Delaware woman had died, one of her relatives was still fraudulently collecting and cashing her Social Security check, 28 years. Improving the collection, the verification, and the use by federal agencies of data on individuals who have died will help curb hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars in improper payments. It's time that the Congress and the administration finally end this frustrating but also solvable problem of improper payments to dead people. The federal government simply has not made it a high enough priority to keep track of the people who have died and to share that information with key agencies to prevent payments to deceased individuals. Last year, some work by the Government Accountability Office highlights why we need to give more attention to the Death Master File, a database maintained by the Social Security Administration. Our GAO witness today will testify that they found some surprising errors in this database. These include, I think they're listed, yeah, right here on this chart. But these include 130 records where the date of birth was after the date of death. Think about that. Date of birth was after the date of death. Also, there were some almost 1,300 records where the age of death was between 111 and 129. It's pretty amazing, but certainly a significant overstatement of the number of Americans who live that long. And these are just among the most glowing errors. Our witnesses today include Mr. Danny Werfel, the Controller at the Office of Management and Budget. We'll discuss some simple, straightforward, and effective steps we can take to dramatically improve the way the federal government maintains its database of people who have died and are no longer eligible for Social Security or other federal payments. And equally important, we'll talk about how to ensure that agencies have a secure and effective way to share information about who in the United States has died so that all agencies that make payments have access to the best and most accurate information. It's my hope that we'll have a good dialogue among the witnesses and the members of our panel, leading to some clear consensus on solutions. We're not interested so much in process. We want product. We're interested in outcome. And I hope that we can use this hearing today as a way to develop the consensus that will lead to that outcome. Let me conclude by noting that we're here today in large part because we believe that we have a fiscal imperative to ensure that the scarce resources we put in the federal programs are well spent. We also have a moral imperative, given the size of the deficit. We must use every tool available to put our fiscal house in order and to give the American people the government they expect and deserve. It's the right thing to do on behalf of taxpayers in this country who entrust us with their hard-earned money. And by working together on this latest in a series of common sense initiatives, we can take another important step in earning their trust once again. And now I want to turn it over to Senator Coburn, who has been a champion in this arena for a number of years, and it's been my privilege to work with him on these and other issues.